Marcus Chen had always been good with his hands. Back on Earth, he could fix anything from ancient combustion engines to the newest quantum processors. That skill had landed him a job with the Galactic Engineering Consortium, working alongside alien species he'd only seen in textbooks. Now, as he watched the last transport ship disappear into the black void of space, he wondered if those same hands would be enough to keep him alive. The Kepler 442 research outpost hung in the shadow of a dying red giant star, its metal skeleton creaking under the stress of solar radiation and micro-meteor impacts. What had once been humanity's proudest achievement in xenoarchaeology was now his prison. The other species had evacuated 3 days ago when the primary fusion reactor started showing critical instability. They'd left him behind because, according to Thektar, the Zephyrian expedition leader, human engineering philosophy is too primitive for such delicate work. Marcus spat into the recycling unit and watched the moisture get processed back into drinking water. Primitive. The word still stung. He'd spent 15 years learning alien technologies, adapting human methods to work with Zephyrian crystal matrices, Altarian biocircuits, and Centaurian quantum cores. He'd solved problems that had stumped their best engineers. But when the reactor started acting up, showing power fluctuations that threatened to tear the station apart, they'd decided his brute force approach was too dangerous. The Zephyrians preferred elegant solutions. Their technology was like art, all flowing curves and harmonic resonances. They could make a power core sing in perfect mathematical harmony. But when that harmony broke down, they were lost. The Altarians were different. Masters of biological engineering who could grow circuits like living tissue. Their solutions were adaptive and self-healing, but slow to respond to rapid changes. The Centaurians dealt in quantum mechanics so advanced that even Marcus, with his enhanced neural interfaces, could barely follow their reasoning. All brilliant in their own ways, all useless when the reactor started throwing error codes that didn't match any known pattern. Marcus had tried to explain his diagnostic approach. Human engineering might not be elegant, but it was practical. When something broke, you took it apart until you found the problem, then you fixed it with whatever tools you had. The aliens had called it destructive analysis and unnecessarily aggressive intervention. They preferred to study the problem for months, running theoretical models and consulting ancient databases. The reactor didn't have months. It had maybe a week before the containment field collapsed entirely. Now, walking through the empty corridors of the outpost, Marcus could hear the structure groaning around him. The artificial gravity fluctuated with each power surge, making his stomach lurch. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow. The air recyclers worked overtime to compensate for failing atmospheric processors, filling the station with the constant hum of overworked machinery. He made his way to Engineering Section C, where the fusion reactor sat like a sleeping giant behind layers of radiation shielding. The control room looked like a battlefield. Displays showed cascading system failures across 17 different subsystems. Power output oscillated wildly between 30 and 90% of nominal. Coolant pressure readings made no sense at all. Marcus pulled up the diagnostic logs from the past week. The problem had started small, just minor fluctuations in the plasma containment field. The Zephyrian engineers had tried to compensate by adjusting the harmonic frequencies of the magnetic field generators. When that failed, they'd brought in the Altarians to see if biological circuits could adapt to the irregularities. The Centaurians had suggested quantum tunneling effects might be interfering with the containment matrix. All of their solutions had made things worse. Marcus cracked his knuckles and settled into the primary engineer's chair. Time to do this the human way. First step, ignore everything the aliens had done and start fresh. He cleared all the harmonic adjustments, biocircuit adaptations, and quantum modifications. The reactor's output immediately dropped to 15%, but at least it was stable. The entire station shuddered as secondary power sources kicked in to compensate. Second step, gather real data. The aliens loved their theoretical models, but Marcus trusted his instruments more than any computer simulation. He activated every sensor array in the engineering section, from basic pressure gauges to exotic particle detectors. If something was wrong with the reactor, he was going to find the physical cause. The sensor sweep took 3 hours. Marcus didn't move from his chair except to grab nutrient bars and coffee from the emergency supplies. The data that came back painted a picture that made his blood run cold. The reactor wasn't just malfunctioning, it was infected. Buried deep in the sensor logs, almost hidden among normal quantum fluctuations, Marcus found traces of an unknown energy signature. Something was feeding on the fusion reaction itself, siphoning off power in irregular pulses. The signature didn't match anything in the galactic databases, but it showed signs of intelligence. The energy drains followed patterns, almost like a language. Marcus leaned back in his chair, mind racing. This wasn't a mechanical failure or design flaw. This was a life form, something that existed in the high-energy environment of a fusion reactor. The aliens' attempts to fix the reactor had only made it stronger, giving it more complex energy patterns to feed on. He spent the next 6 hours mapping the creature's feeding patterns. It seemed to prefer certain types of energy fluctuations, avoiding others. The Zephyrian harmonic frequencies had been like a dinner bell, calling it to feast. The Altarian biocircuits had given it new pathways to explore. The Centaurian quantum modifications had opened up entire dimensions of energy it had never tasted before. No wonder the reactor was failing. The creature wasn't trying to destroy anything. It was just hungry, and every attempt to feed it more complex energy had made it grow larger and hungrier. The solution when it came to him was beautifully simple. Humans had dealt with parasites for millions of years. Sometimes the best approach wasn't to fight them, but to make their environment unsuitable for survival. Marcus began systematically stripping away every sophisticated system in the reactor. He disabled the harmonic frequency modulators, replacing them with crude magnetic field generators. He rerouted power away from the biocircuits, using basic copper conductors instead. He shut down the quantum processors and switched to simple digital controls. With each change, the energy creature's signature grew weaker. It had adapted to feast on sophisticated, complex energy patterns. Raw, unmodulated fusion plasma was apparently too crude for its tastes. The aliens would have been horrified. Marcus was turning their elegant reactor into a brute force power plant that belonged in a museum. But as he watched the power output stabilize and the creature's energy signature fade to barely detectable levels, he couldn't help but smile. Sometimes primitive was exactly what the situation called for. By the time the reactor reached stable operation at 70% power, Marcus had been awake for 36 hours straight. The station's lights had stopped flickering. The artificial gravity held steady. The air recyclers settled into their normal, quiet rhythm. He slumped in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. The emergency supplies would last maybe 2 weeks if he was careful. The communication array was still down, damaged by the power fluctuations. He was alone on a dying station in deep space, with no way to call for help. But the reactor was running. He'd solved a problem that had stumped the galaxy's best engineers using nothing but human stubbornness and a willingness to take things apart until they worked. Marcus closed his eyes and tried not to think about what would happen when the aliens realized they'd abandoned their outpost to die because they were too proud to listen to a primitive human engineer. The creature in the reactor was still there, he knew, weakened but not dead. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus wondered if there were others like it, hidden in the sophisticated systems that kept galactic civilization running. Energy parasites that fed on complexity, growing stronger with every elegant solution and refined modification. The aliens built their technology like works of art, beautiful and sophisticated, But sometimes, Marcus thought as he drifted off to sleep, sometimes you needed a hammer instead of a paintbrush. The station hummed quietly around him, its crude but functional systems keeping him alive in the void. Outside, the red giant star continued its slow death, bathing the outpost in radiation that would have killed him in minutes without the shielding. Marcus dreamed of Earth, of machines that broke down and could be fixed with spare parts and determination. When he woke up, he was going to figure out how to get the communication array working. And when he did, he had some very interesting news to share with the Galactic Engineering Consortium. News about energy parasites, elegant solutions, and why sometimes the most primitive approach was the most effective one of all. The universe was about to learn that human engineering wasn't primitive. It was just honest about what it took to make things work when everything else failed. Marcus slept soundly for the first time in a week, surrounded by the gentle hum of a reactor that ran on pure, unrefined human stubbornness. Marcus woke to the sound of something that shouldn't exist. In the silence of space, with only the mechanical hum of life support systems, he heard what could only be described as singing. The melody drifted through the station's corridors, hauntingly beautiful and completely impossible. Marcus grabbed his emergency toolkit and a portable sensor array, following the sound toward the lower decks where the secondary power systems were housed. The singing grew stronger as he descended. It wasn't coming through the air, he realized, but through the station's metal framework itself. The entire structure was resonating like a massive tuning fork, conducting vibrations that his human ears interpreted as music. In secondary engineering, Marcus found the source. The backup fusion cells were glowing with soft, pulsing light that matched the rhythm of the song. His sensor array went crazy, detecting energy patterns unlike anything he'd seen before. These weren't the crude, hungry signatures from the main reactor. This was something else entirely, something that was trying to communicate. Marcus spent the next 12 hours studying the patterns. The energy beings in the backup systems were different from the parasite he'd driven out of the main reactor. Where that one had been chaotic and consumptive, these creatures showed signs of organization and purpose. They were using the station's power grid as a kind of nervous system, passing information between different sections at the speed of light. The breakthrough came when Marcus realized the creatures weren't just using the power grid. They were improving it. Every cable junction they touched became more efficient. Power conduits that had shown minor energy losses for years suddenly ran at 100% efficiency. The backup systems were producing 12% more power than their rated capacity, without any increase in fuel consumption. The aliens had been wrong about everything. These weren't parasites or malfunctions. They were symbionts, energy-based life forms that could enhance technological systems in ways no organic engineer could imagine, but they could only work with what they were given. The sophisticated alien technologies provided rich, complex energy patterns that the creatures could manipulate and improve. Human technology, with its crude but stable power flows, was like offering gourmet chefs nothing but bread and water. Marcus sat in the engineering bay, watching the creatures' light patterns dance across the walls. The aliens had encountered these beings before, he was certain. The energy signatures were too refined, too purposeful to be a first contact situation. But they'd been approaching the relationship all wrong. The aliens tried to control and direct the energy beings, treating them like sophisticated tools. When the creatures didn't behave as expected, the aliens labeled them as malfunctions and tried to eliminate them. The hungry parasite in the main reactor hadn't been evil or destructive. It had been starved and confused, cut off from its natural symbiotic relationship by engineers who didn't understand what they were dealing with. Marcus began an experiment. Using spare parts from the machine shop, he built a simple test circuit. Nothing fancy, just a basic power relay with some crude frequency modulators. Then he introduced one of the energy beings to the system. The results were immediate. The creature began exploring the circuit, learning its pathways and limitations. Within an hour, it had optimized the power flow and started generating new frequency patterns. The simple relay was now producing stable energy outputs that should have required equipment 10 times more complex. But the creature wasn't satisfied. It kept generating new patterns, more sophisticated frequencies that the crude human components couldn't handle. Marcus watched the circuit begin to overheat as the being tried to push it beyond its physical limitations. That's when he understood the real problem. The energy creatures were trying to give the organic races technology they weren't ready for. Every time they encountered a system, they automatically upgraded it to levels of sophistication that stressed the underlying hardware to its breaking point. The aliens' elegant designs could handle more improvement before failing, but even they had limits. Marcus shut down the test circuit before it burned out completely. The energy being retreated to the backup power cells, its light patterns shifting to what he was learning to recognize as disappointment. "I know," he said to the empty room, feeling slightly foolish for talking to a creature made of living electricity. "You're trying to help, but we're not ready for what you want to give us." The lights pulsed once, almost like acknowledgement. Marcus spent the next 3 days developing a new approach. Instead of trying to limit or control the energy beings, he would give them what they really needed, a challenge worthy of their abilities. The station's communication array had been damaged beyond conventional repair. The quantum entanglement matrices were completely scrambled, and the harmonic resonance chambers had suffered cascade failures that would normally require a shipyard to fix. By alien standards, it was a total loss. By human standards, it was Tuesday. Marcus began stripping the communication array down to its basic components. He kept the fundamental transmission hardware, but removed all the sophisticated control systems that had been damaged by power fluctuations. In their place, he installed crude manual controls and simple analog circuits that wouldn't be affected by energy surges. Then he introduced the energy beings to the rebuilt system. The creatures swarmed over the communication array like excited children with a new toy. They began optimizing and upgrading, turning Marcus's crude manual controls into sophisticated quantum interfaces. But this time, he was ready for them. Every time the beings upgraded a component beyond the hardware's limits, Marcus replaced it with something more robust. He pulled parts from life support backups, navigation sensors, even the food processors. Anything that could handle high-energy loads got repurposed into the communication system. It was the most insane engineering project Marcus had ever attempted. He was building a communication array using coffee makers and air recycler components, guided by energy beings that existed in a state of matter most physicists considered theoretical. It should have been impossible. By every rule of conventional engineering, the hybrid system he was creating couldn't possibly work. On the 7th day, it came online. The first signal Marcus sent was a simple test transmission to the nearest relay station. The response came back in under 30 seconds, crystal clear and stronger than anything the original array had ever achieved. The energy beings had turned his collection of salvaged parts into a communication system more powerful than the alien's original design. But that wasn't the most important discovery. When Marcus accessed the station's historical databases to send his report, he found records he'd never seen before. Hidden files that had been locked behind quantum encryption barriers too complex for conventional access. The energy beings had unlocked them, revealing decades of classified research on what the Galactic Consortium called energy anomalies. The aliens knew about the energy beings. They'd been studying them for over 200 years, trying to understand how to harness their power without losing control of their technology. Every major advancement in galactic civilization had been achieved through careful manipulation of these creatures, but always at arm's length. The aliens were terrified of true symbiosis. They wanted the benefits of the energy being's abilities without accepting them as partners. So they created elaborate systems to contain and direct the creatures, treating them like exotic tools rather than intelligent life forms. And the energy beings, starved for meaningful interaction, had gradually become more aggressive in their attempts to connect with organic technology. What the aliens interpreted as parasitic behavior was actually desperate loneliness. Marcus looked at the hybrid communication array, watching the gentle light patterns of the creatures as they maintained perfect system harmonics. These beings didn't want to dominate or replace organic life. They wanted to help, to create something greater than either species could achieve alone. The humans could provide robust hardware and practical engineering. The energy beings could provide optimization and enhancement beyond anything currently possible. Together, they could revolutionize technology throughout the galaxy. But first, Marcus had to survive long enough to share his discovery. His food supplies were running low, and the life support systems were showing signs of strain. The station wasn't designed for long-term habitation by a single person, and even with the energy being's improvements, some systems were reaching their operational limits. Marcus began planning his next project, using the creature's abilities to enhance the station's environmental systems. If he could establish a stable symbiotic relationship with the beings, they might be able to keep him alive indefinitely. And while he worked, he sent carefully coded messages through his hybrid communication array, reports that looked like routine maintenance updates but contained detailed information about his discoveries. The energy beings helped encrypt the data, making it undetectable to standard monitoring systems. If the aliens thought they'd left a primitive human engineer to die on a failing outpost, they were about to learn how wrong they could be. Marcus was going to survive, and when he did, he was going to change everything. The energy beings pulsed with what he was learning to recognize as anticipation. They had found what they'd been searching for across centuries of interaction with organic life, a partner willing to work with them as equals. The universe was about to discover what humans and energy beings could accomplish together. The response fleet arrived 3 weeks later, just as Marcus was putting the finishing touches on his life support enhancement project. Through his upgraded sensors, he watched 12 ships drop out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Zephyrian cruisers with their flowing organic lines. Altarian bioships that looked more grown than built. Centaurian vessels that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. And one human transport, looking crude and angular next to the alien designs. Marcus smiled as he watched the fleet approach. They'd come to salvage whatever was left of the outpost and collect his body. Instead, they were going to find something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The energy beings throughout the station pulsed with excitement as the ships drew near. They could sense the sophisticated technology aboard the alien vessels, all those elegant systems just waiting for optimization. But they stayed focused on their partnership with Marcus, maintaining the enhanced systems that had kept him alive far longer than any organic engineer thought possible. The first communication came from Thektar's flagship, transmitted on standard diplomatic frequencies. Kepler 442 Outpost, this is Zephyrian Command Vessel Harmony of Spheres. We are prepared to begin salvage operations. Please confirm status of human engineer Marcus Chen. Marcus activated his hybrid communication array, feeling the energy beings help modulate the signal for maximum clarity and range. Harmony of Spheres, this is Engineer Chen. Kepler 442 Outpost is fully operational and ready to receive visitors. I've made some improvements while you were gone. The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. When Thektar's voice returned, it carried undertones of confusion and suspicion that Marcus had learned to recognize in Zephyrian speech patterns. Engineer Chen, our sensors indicate impossible energy readings from your location. Please explain the nature of these improvements. Come aboard and I'll show you, Marcus replied. but I'd recommend bringing your best engineers. You're going to want to take notes. The delegation that docked with the station 2 hours later included representatives from all three major alien species, plus Commander Sarah Walsh from the human transport. Marcus met them at the main airlock, looking healthier and more energetic than he had when they'd abandoned him. Thektar's crystalline features shifted through several colors that Marcus recognized as deep confusion. Engineer Chen, how is this possible? The reactor was failing, the life support systems were beyond repair. Our projections indicated total system collapse within 72 hours. Your projections were based on the assumption that I'd try to fix things the way you would, Marcus replied. I took a different approach. Follow me. He led the group through corridors that hummed with perfect efficiency. Emergency lighting had been replaced with panels that provided warm, natural illumination. The air recyclers ran so quietly they were almost silent. Yet the atmosphere was cleaner and more comfortable than it had ever been during normal operations. In the main reactor chamber, the alien engineers stared at displays showing power output at 115% of rated capacity with zero fluctuations. The elegant control systems they'd installed had been replaced with crude manual interfaces that looked like they belonged in a museum. This is impossible, whispered Dr. Veltar, the Altarian bioengineer. These primitive controls cannot possibly manage fusion reactions with this level of precision. You're right, Marcus agreed. They can't. But they don't have to. He activated a sensor array that showed the energy patterns flowing through the reactor core. The aliens gasped as they saw the signatures of energy beings working in perfect harmony with the crude human technology. You've found a way to control them, Thektar breathed, his crystalline body shifting to colors Marcus had never seen before. Control them? No. Marcus shook his head. I found a way to work with them. There's a difference. Commander Walsh stepped forward, her expression skeptical. Marcus, the consortium has been studying these energy anomalies for decades. They're dangerous, unpredictable. Every attempt to integrate them into our technology has ended in system failures. Because you've been treating them like exotic tools instead of intelligent partners, Marcus replied. He gestured to the displays around them. These beings don't want to be controlled or contained. They want to help. But they need systems robust enough to handle their enhancements and partners willing to work with them instead of trying to dominate them. Dr. Kenthara, the Centaurian quantum specialist, flickered between several probability states before settling into a configuration Marcus recognized as intense curiosity. Show us how this partnership functions, human engineer. Marcus led them to the communication array, where his hybrid creation of salvaged parts and energy being enhancements operated with capabilities that exceeded anything in the galactic databases. As the aliens watched in amazement, he demonstrated system functions that should have required technology centuries more advanced. The energy beings understand systems in ways we never could, Marcus explained. They see inefficiencies and optimization opportunities that our instruments can't detect. But they need stable platforms to work from, and organic partners who understand practical engineering. He pulled up the classified files he'd discovered, displaying them on the chamber's main screen. Your people have known about these beings for 2 centuries, but you've approached the relationship all wrong. You tried to create containment systems and control mechanisms because you were afraid of losing technological superiority. Thektar's color patterns shifted to what Marcus recognized as deep shame. The energy beings represent power beyond our current understanding. If organic species could access their abilities freely, it would destabilize the balance between our civilizations. Or it would give all of us capabilities we've never dreamed of, Marcus countered. Look at what we've accomplished here in just 3 weeks. Imagine what we could do with years of cooperation. Commander Walsh frowned. Marcus, you're talking about fundamentally changing galactic technology. The economic implications alone would be catastrophic. Entire industries would become obsolete overnight. Obsolete or transformed? Marcus asked. The energy beings don't want to replace our technology. They want to enhance it, make it better than we ever thought possible. But they need our creativity, our problem-solving abilities, our willingness to try approaches that seem impossible. As if summoned by his words, the energy beings throughout the station began a coordinated display. Light patterns flowed through the walls and floors, creating a three-dimensional map of technological improvements they could implement across the entire fleet. Each ship in the waiting formation was highlighted with potential enhancements that would double or triple their operational capabilities. The alien engineers stared in wonder as the beings showed them optimization possibilities they'd never considered. Fusion reactors that could achieve 150% efficiency. Navigation systems that could plot courses through 11-dimensional space. Communication arrays that could transmit instantaneous messages across galactic distances. But the most stunning revelation came when the energy beings projected plans for hybrid technology that combined the best elements from all species. Zephyrian harmonic systems enhanced with Altarian adaptability and Centaurian quantum mechanics, all running on robust human engineering that could handle any amount of enhancement without failing. "This is what they've been trying to give us all along," Marcus said quietly. "Technology that transcends what any single species could achieve. But it requires trust, cooperation, and the willingness to accept partners who think in ways we never could." Dr. Veltar's biocircuits pulsed with excitement. "The evolutionary implications are staggering. Organic and energy-based life forms working in true symbiosis, each contributing unique capabilities to shared goals. The question is," Marcus continued, "are you ready to abandon centuries of fear and control in favor of partnership?" Thektar flickered through several color cycles before settling on a pattern that indicated deep contemplation. "Engineer Chen, what you propose would require fundamental changes to galactic law, economic structures, technological protocols. The Consortium Council would need to approve any integration of energy being technology." Marcus smiled. "Then I guess it's a good thing I've been sending them detailed reports for the past 3 weeks. The aliens' shocked silence was broken by Commander Walsh's communication device. She listened for a moment, then looked up with an expression of amazement. "Marcus, the Consortium has called an emergency session. They want you to present your findings to the full Council in 72 hours. And they want the energy beings to attend as full participants in the discussion," Marcus added, watching the aliens' faces as the implications hit them. "These aren't mindless tools or exotic phenomena. They're intelligent beings with their own interests and goals. Any agreement moving forward needs to treat them as equal partners." The energy beings throughout the station pulsed in harmony, their light patterns creating a visual symphony of anticipation and hope. For the first time in centuries, they would be able to communicate directly with organic leadership, to share their vision of what galactic civilization could become through cooperation. Thektar's colors shifted to what Marcus had learned to recognize as grudging respect. "Human engineer, when we abandoned you here, we believed we were leaving a primitive technician to die with his crude tools. We never imagined that primitive tools in the right hands could solve problems your sophisticated systems couldn't," Marcus finished. "The energy beings didn't need elegant solutions. They needed practical partners willing to meet them halfway." Dr. Kenthara flickered through several probability states. "The implications extend beyond technology. If energy beings can form true partnerships with organic species, we must reconsider our understanding of consciousness, intelligence, and what constitutes life itself." Marcus nodded toward the light patterns flowing around them. "They've been trying to tell us that for 200 years. We just weren't listening. As the delegation prepared to return to their ships for the journey to Consortium headquarters, Marcus felt the energy being's anticipation flowing through the station's enhanced systems. The universe was about to change in ways that none of the galactic species had imagined. The aliens had thought they were rescuing technology from a failed outpost. Instead, they were carrying home proof that the future belonged to partnerships that transcended the boundaries between organic and energy-based life. And at the center of it all was a human engineer who'd been left to die because his approach was too primitive for sophisticated problems. Marcus smiled as he watched the fleet prepare for hyperspace transition. Sometimes the most primitive approach was exactly what the universe needed. The energy beings sang through the station's hull, their harmonies carrying across space toward a future where cooperation would replace control, and where the word primitive would become a compliment rather than an insult. The galaxy was about to learn that humans and energy beings working together could accomplish the impossible. And it all started with one stubborn engineer who refused to die quietly.